Welcome to Ali Fitness Podcast, a weekly production all about bringing health into fitness. I really don't know quite how to introduce our guest today because I know whatever I say, I won't be able to sum up the factotum that she truly is. I'm also wary about what order I list her roles, as I'm sure that the effort she gives to each one changes by the hour, and I dare say by the day. The one thing I will say is that even though she is all these things, at the essence and core of it all, taking these roles away, Gabby is truly Gabby herself. World-renowned athlete, New York best time seller, author, wife, mother of three, at 6'3", which is slightly taller than me, the former professional beach volleyball player and Nike's first female spokeswoman, I might add. Gabby Reece is the true definition of both athleticism and feminine beauty. Gabby's commanding presence, passion for healthy living and fitness expertise makes her a popular leader in the world of health, fitness and wellness. I met Gabby and her okay of a surfer husband, you may have heard of him, Laird Hamilton, at their amazing XPT experience that they ran in Miami in May. And I felt compelled to reach out to her just to see if she could share some of the wisdom with all of us. Gabby, welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you. That's the nicest thing anyone said about me in a long time.
Don't lie. It's true though, and it's very hard to say because, you know, sometimes we get caught up in these are my roles and so this is who I am. Mm-hmm. And I feel like take away all those roles from you and you're still who you are, which is an amazing person in itself. And despite what you've done and everything else, it's just where you are or who you're being right now is what I want to share with people.
Well, you know, listen, I think I learned that in a way, not the hard way, but, you know, it's interesting when you're growing up, I think you're searching for an identity, right? Like, I think that's why I fell in love with sports. Like, you're tall because you're a volleyball player or you play basketball, right? So it gives you this identity or tribe. And then as you get older, I think something goes the opposite. And I had an experience once. I had taken one of my daughters to a driving range, golf, right? And I was there and I was retired already from beach volleyball. And there was a gentleman there and he was talking to me just like a person to person. And then a little bit through the conversation, I realized that he sort of had some sense of my background. And he said to me, weren't you that volleyball player, Gabby Reece? And I was like, and in that moment, I remember thinking, oh, my ego was like, oh, because he said after that. And so what are you doing? Just being a mom. He was not being malintended, right? This is my own filter. But I remember two things feeling really important to understand. One, the reason I reacted is because my ego was bent out of shape. And let me just tell you all the things I'm working on, which is silly. And then the other thing, and I just said, well, actually, you know, I still am Gabby. Just one of the things I have done in my life is play volleyball. And so for me, I think that's been really important as I get older is for any of us, right? Like maybe you are a CEO, maybe you are a parent and a partner, and we're a lot of things. But if we can still always just be really comfortable and good enough that we are who we are and not in the identity way, but just in that human way, it makes a lot of things easier.
Yeah, and it's sort of tricky. And when I speak to you, it's like part of me feels like, yeah, but it's easy for you to say because you're already all those things anyway. So now you've just got to be. But then on the other hand, I think, well, actually, it's even harder for you because you've got to separate your ego from all of these things and actually see who you are underneath all of that. So, you know, I'm sort of torn as to which way is the hardest. But I remember a great conversation we had in Miami, and we were talking about just being, and not so much doing, but just being. And you shared a lovely story of a good friend of yours who helped look after your kids, and how she was just this loving, giving person of service that would just be there for you whenever you needed. And to me, you were describing your hero.
I think when I can see somebody, and this is someone I'm close to, so you sort of know, you know, it's not just a far away, you know, kind of impression. when you can see a person who is so comfortable with themselves and so generous for the sake of being generous versus, like even, sometimes it feels like there's a level of, well, this makes sense to give a lot to because this situation will have a lot to return, right? Somebody who was genuine and comfortable enough and secure enough to just be and to be living. And, I've gotten geared up in ways maybe in my past, or I'm in environments where everyone's getting somewhere or accomplishing something or reaching a peak or, accumulation or whatever. And I understand kind of the need for that because that stuff gets things done and it gives us some way to have a creative outlet and a challenge. These things can be productive if they're done for the right reasons. But I remember thinking how powerful that was to be comfortable to do that. So there's a lot to learn. And sometimes from the most quiet or the most understated people out there, not from the people like, I'm the champion. It's like, okay, that's cool. But there's other things out there to learn.
Yeah, and you must feel like people just talk to you sometimes or because of who I was going to say because of who you are, but it's not because of who you are. It's because of what you've done.
Well, listen, I mean, that always is easier on me. Like if people are just, a little nicer or something. But at the end of the day, I feel like this. I can sense people pretty quickly. And if I walk into a situation, my job or the thing I desire is to be polite and to be warm and to be receiving. And if people respond actually off of that more than this weird, this other preconceived identity that precedes me. And that's only sometimes. There's plenty of places I go and I'm just a very tall woman, right? It's not like, oh, everybody knows my biography. So I think for me, I always lead with that. And that's at least what I come away with from then. And then from those people, and you can tell if people are, being silly, like they're being extra nice to you for some reason, that, but it's pretty easy to clear through.
Yeah. So I've got to ask you, what's your mission when it comes to being a leader in the world of health and fitness? Because you must be torn sometimes because, you've done what you've done and you've got a lot of things now that are really important to you, like 3 wonderful children who maybe not be wonderful all the time, but that's another story. And then another husband who you maybe class in the children category sometimes as well. So you've got all these other things that are important to you, but there's obviously clearly some sort of passion or some sort of mission driving you to be a leader in the health and fitness industry. What is your mission?
I think it's just about contributing. I think if we get ahead of ourselves and overly define what it is we think we're doing, I think sometimes we can actually miss what we're really supposed to be doing. So for me, I say, okay, I am having the opportunity to sort of inhabit this space. And I do it by myself and I do it with Laird and I do it with our team at XPT. And it's just saying, in which way can I contribute? That is a real reflection of what I know and also who I am. So it's not about like, I'm not trying to be Laird or someone else, or do it in such an overly strategic way that, this is very on trend right now. We should be doing this. Now, having said that, I'm not an idiot. I'm not out there, shooting blanks into the sky. Obviously, when you run businesses, there's a level of strategy. However, I think when you sort of trust what you're doing, it's not about what's popular or on trend. So for me, it's really about trying to contribute, but also trying to be the best, not only version of myself, but the best example of what it is that we're actually talking about, so that you can talk less about it and people will just learn from watching you. So I think it's kind of all those things together, and what I represent will actually be defined by other people, not by me.
So it's more like, look at my values, look at my actions, as opposed to this is the message that I want to convey.
I think so, because everybody's going to pull a message that they want or need from you at that time. And so really, I just feel like myself and Laird and I together, we are so incredibly fortunate because we've had access to Kelly Starrett. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him.
Absolutely, yes.
So Kelly and his incredible wife, Juliet, were just here at my house staying for 2 days with their 2 daughters. And, we are surrounded by some of, the most talented, fine human beings. And so I think for Laird and I, it's like, hey, for whatever reason, we have access to some of these people. What if we could curate, break down baby food and, help share this with other people? I think that's more of what it is and the contribution, and also willing to do it yourself, right? So a lot of the stuff we do for years and years before, and we go, okay, so here's what we know today about what we've been doing. And it seems to be working, in all these ways for us. And then how do we disseminate that information and try to share it with people? And by the way, that keeps changing, right? Like you keep learning what you thought you were sort of in the right pocket. You were close, but there was some other information that you needed to learn. So I think that's how we both view it.
Mm. Yeah, and talking about that, so what does fitness and health mean to you now versus, I guess, in your pro athletic days? I'm assuming it's changed a fair bit and continues to.
When you're playing a sport, it's so much about performance and like outcome. It's a little bit of a sharp end of a stick, but then actually what happens is hopefully you kind of, keep training, you keep experimenting, and that's without bouncing all over the place. I'm not suggesting try this one week and try that another. You've got to give stuff time to really know how it works. And sometimes it's a mistake and you pay a price for that. And, that's just part of it. But so much about performance. And then as you get older, and certainly if you move out of your sport, or maybe when you're at the tail end of your sport, it becomes about longevity and how can I do this for a longer period of time. And then you start to get into, hopefully, things like, wait a second, self-care. What about being optimizing myself as a human being? So it's great if the avatar is bigger, stronger, faster, but if the controller, the mind, the spirit, the emotions is out of whack, and in fact isn't even really well equipped to drive the avatar, what's the point? Right? So you have all these high performing people, they're ripped, they have low body fat, they do all these external correct things, even if it's go to sleep and eat well. But I think it's a constant calibration between, oh yes, am I moving? Am I eating in a way to support myself physically and emotionally? Am I getting to bed? Am I doing the work on myself from childhood BS to am I working on my relationship? Am I trying to improve as a parent? Am I getting more informed as a business person? So now if you ask me, what does it mean? It's actually become a setup for me to make the other parts easier. So if I'm feeling good and I'm kind of balanced and my hormones are working and I'm mobile and I've had good sleep, I'm now able to tackle some of these other things that are more nuanced, more complicated, touchier, harder to deal with emotionally. So I'm looking at it now in a much, sort of a broader way as a tool to help me with all these other things.
Yeah. And I guess it's sort of like you're taking it to the next level. And you've mentioned on another podcast, I remember hearing you say how Paul sort of has taken it to that next level again, that spiritual level. And it's like, I guess your experiences from your pro athlete days are now helping you live the life that you want to live now. But I dare say if you had a thought like that back then, you wouldn't have been focused enough as an athlete, would you?
I don't know. I think you could be a real killer because I think if you are really that aware, it's hard to do at that age. Then all of a sudden you're looking not only at your life differently, you're looking at your sport differently. And most likely what I would think too is that you would be more connected and clear with the idea of what a huge opportunity was in front of you. But I just don't think that's the way nature and life works, right? I think it's just more balanced where, hey, you get all this horsepower and like all this energy and all this stuff and maybe a good chip on your shoulder to kind of get you through and you're going to show everybody. And that actually has its place. But then as you do that, I think there is sort of a hope or a responsibility that you start to expand what is driving you and what do you want it to look like. Oh, and by the way, for even as an aging athlete, what am I going to do today that's going to support my ability to train in 40 years? You are not thinking about that in your 20s, because if you were, you'd have to look at it or at least be clear, like, hey, what I'm doing right now to perform really well for the next 7 to 10 years might actually crush me in the long run. So I think, that ignorance is bliss. But then as you sort of mature, one would hope, hey, you know what? I have to look at some of the corners and some of the pockets and see if I can become high performing in all these ways.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And I'm really excited when you talk about self-care, because so many people relate that to selfishness. And yet to me, it's the opposite, because I see how you treat self-care and how that actually helps you help others, including your family and the wider public. How do you sort of, do you have like a self-care schedule, or how do you make sure that you are looking after yourself? Because I know when you don't, things just don't work out.
Well, I'm not going to over qualify it for gender, but I would say women historically are not as good at this, because just like typically, there's always exceptions. Men don't take things as personally, and women usually take it a little more personal. The flip side is guys don't think someone will take it personally, like their children or their partner, if they want to go train. And a woman feels guilt and weirdness saying, I'm going to carve this time out and I need to do it, right? So that door kind of swings both ways. And it's not that I do have a pretty set schedule, because it's also like everybody else. For me personally, some people can do it later. If I don't get my training done in the morning, my day will eat me up, right? My schedule will eat me up. Emails will eat me up. My children, their schedules, my work, those commitments, I'll be gone. So I do have definite times, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, that I do something. And listen, if something comes up, I have a work trip, my kid has some performance, one of the kids has something, yeah, great. You bend and you flex, but you have a kind of a set regimen. And then Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, I have people come to train at my house, my friends. And the good thing about that is, even on the days I don't want to, or I could sit at my desk for 5 hours, I've got people coming into my gate and I'm like, okay, I better get out there. So I also have said this many times, that it's not about I get up every day and I can't wait to get after it, or that I love, not eating gluten all the time. It's that I just try to create an environment that I can be successful. So there is a difference, and people who don't get to train or don't like it or don't want to eat a certain way, they think that the people who do are fanatical and completely enjoy it. And that isn't the case. What it is they understand, first of all, how good they're going to feel after, but also it's more about having a system, take the emotion out of it. You're just going to get it done. And they've figured that out. And I actually think that's the biggest difference between people doing it and not doing it. And not one group really loves it and one group really doesn't.
Yeah, I like how you explain that. It's like, it's the emotion just taken out of it. And it's like, well, hang on, what do you want the outcome to be? And how can you set up your environment so that happens?
That's right. Well, it's like an alcoholic saying, hey, I'm an alcoholic. I just am not going to have the stuff at home. It's not saying, well, I have alcohol in my house and I shouldn't want to drink. And no, it's like, hey, listen, we all have impulses and things we'd rather be doing. Humans are inherently lazy. It's like understanding all of that and being like, yeah, cool, I get it. I'm just going to put a system in place that I can be successful and not bash myself on the days I blow it, or the days I don't feel like doing it, even though if I get it done. And I think it's, I can say it easily because I came through sports, so I understood very quickly how good it feels. But I think it's people understanding nobody really wants to die in training every day. And a lot of times I see people that are like overtraining or doing this or whatever, and you want to ask them like, well, what are you running from? Because there's another side of that that's actually unhealthy, right? Overtraining, some kind of level of denial in food. So everything has to be balanced.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you say that. What are you running from? I recently heard a guy who wrote a book about running, and he said runners are either running from something or running to something, or both.
Yeah. And it's just something, even if it's just we're honest with ourselves, this doesn't have to be an exploration that you talk to your friends about, but just that we're always in a situation where we're honest with ourselves, because from that place, we can navigate the right environment. If we're not even be willing to start from the truth about how we're feeling or why we're using what as which kind of tool, I don't think then we ever have a chance to really navigate it.
And, you mentioned balance, but how do you, and I mean, you're a great example, and I wasn't joking in my introduction about you just being this jack of all trades, because, I mean, really, like most people struggle just to be a mom of three teenagers, or older than one of them's like 25 now, right?
Yeah,
but
exactly 24.
24, right? Yeah. So, but then you've got two teenagers. Well, I mean, 12, 13. I'm calling her a teenager because I'm sure if she's anything like my daughter, 6 going on 16, yeah. Like that for most people is enough to deal with. But then on top of that, obviously, you've got this sort of role as a fitness leader, and both. You do a lot of guest speaking, and then you're also obviously taking people through workouts 3 times a week. And then on top of that, obviously you've got some huge businesses going on, and you're a big part of the XPT, which I'd love to talk about in a moment. And then obviously there's a lot of other businesses in and amongst all that. How do you divide your time? Do you have a sort of a mantra that you follow that's like, this is my mission, so if it fits that, then I'll do it? Like, how do you work out what to do and what not to do?
That's actually a really important question. I think we have to know if something fits into the bigger picture, and also, or just be clear why we're doing it. I've talked about this before. Like, am I doing this to get positive attention that then I can use that ball of energy in another direction for something else that already exists, or a business that I'd like to either push it to, or something I have in my mind that I want to do later? Am I doing this for money, and do I feel comfortable with that? And just kind of always checking in with why you're doing it, but also having a strategy, looking ahead. I don't think we arrive, we just land at places. So this idea of being certainly personally present, but in my professional life, looking and doing doing things here and now, but also looking ahead in 1 year and 3 and in 5, saying, hey, where do I want this to be? Because I better start planting those seeds now, because those things take time. That's been a valuable lesson. That is, the oldest lesson, which is, especially when it comes to business and bigger businesses, they just take time. And so, if you have the idea, how do you start that process of getting that momentum and going through the process of making sure you have the right team and making mistakes? But just being clear as to your whys, and also thinking, if you had to represent this, does it make you feel uncomfortable or comfortable to your true self? And I don't try to do everything at once. That's the other thing is I liken it to kind of skeet shooting. Even if they have 3 discs out, you hit the one that has to get hit first, then you look to the next, and then you go to the next. If you tried to hit all 3 at once, you wouldn't hit any, right? So I think the idea of multitasking is only not only unrealistic, it's overrated. So I think it's saying, hey, right now I have a meeting, or we're flying for this business. This is what I'm doing. I haven't spent quality time with my children. That is what I'm doing. And literally just looking, and sometimes it comes onto you like a wave. Like you feel like there's 4 or 5 things that actually really feel like they need your attention. And that's when you have to understand what really does and what can wait till tomorrow. And so I think that has been helpful. But it's a dance, and you wear a lot of different hats, and a lot of people do that. But it is about constantly checking in. Does this feel good? Does this person feel good? Do I want to work with them? Do they represent something I believe in, or me? If they walked into a room and I wasn't there, or Laird wasn't there, would they be representing something that was who we are? And if it's not, even if it's someone important or successful, or they want to pay you a lot of money, I think you have to look at that because it's short-term thinking. If you're thinking about long-term and long relationships and people trusting you and all these things, that looks different.
Yeah. And just as you talk, I think about XPT and I think about the staff that you've employed there and the people that, are surrounding you, like your colleagues, really. I mean, they're amazing people and they're representing you to the fullest. And so you obviously do that with the people that you get to surround you as well.
Yeah. I mean, I have that in my friends, but we all do spend so much time working. And so I really want to, when I have the choice, doesn't mean I've always had the choice, doesn't mean I still always have the choice, but when I have the choice to work with people that not only sort of you reflect similar values, even if they do it differently, that if you were turning over your business, which if you're going to grow your business, guess what? You're going to turn it over. You'd be willing to say, yes, not only does that represent me, but actually they do certain things in the thing I started better than I do. And that's also a very, important lesson is to be willing to let go of control and to let people put their own little interpretation on things, because it's unrealistic to think if you can control every element of the business that the business will ever really thrive. It will only thrive when other people can take other responsibilities. The business functions without you. The business functions when you're asleep. All of these things that I think are really important. But having high quality human beings that are around you and work, that are willing to work with you, is maybe one of the greatest gifts in life.
Yeah, totally. And talking about XPT, why XPT and what is it?
So XPT, basically our mantra is breathe, move, and recover. And I think for us, so XPT is really just an organic extension of something Laird and I were doing for a lot of years. And then Jennifer, who basically is, the day in and day out boss and runs XPT, has been a friend of mine. She's been a friend of mine since about 93 or 94, and she played competitive beach volleyball. And then we started working together. And several years ago, she's like, we should have people come and you and Laird can run them through the paces and share with them. And I was like, oh, there is no way. Like, I'm not going to have people take time out of their lives and come see us for 3 days and like try to share with them. We were doing it with our friends and that felt pretty organic and natural. But anyway, we started it, and it's a real, representation or slice of a lot of the stuff we were doing, because I think for Laird and I, differently and together, the notion of breathing, let's just start there. Everyone can do it. It's free and you can do it everywhere. And it's the essence of life. Most of us are doing it wrong. Okay. Seems pretty important. It's a very powerful tool. Move, our bodies are meant to move, and move doesn't mean crush, even though you should crush once in a while, put that stress on the system, get that heart rate up, whatever. But it doesn't mean, die a slow death at every training, because I think that is a bad message. And then recover. And it isn't, it's my day off, so I didn't do anything. It was, no, recover is the idea of participating in your recovery. So is that with breathing? Is that with heat and ice? Is that with stretching or mobility? And sort of trying to build out these messages around, whether it's health and fitness or self-care, because the problem is sometimes people just throw out images, flat images of people, very lean or very muscular or, whatever. And they think, oh, that is the picture of health. And I think both Laird and I were like, that is such an expanded, or that's a limited message. How can we expand that and also allow it to change? So as we learn and we grow and you get more science and more information, you can sort of keep building it into the message of XPT and in the different silos. And it's actually been a lot of fun, because what happens is it's sort of like forced classroom. And so we're like, okay, well, we have to keep improving. And we get to meet all these, we'll have guest lecturers and things like that. And so selfishly, it's like, oh yeah, we have people coming to us and teaching us. And so it's been a real gift, XPT.
Yeah. And I guess too, you're surrounding yourself by like-minded people. Even your guests are all people that want to exceed in life. You know, they're not necessarily sports people or even necessarily that fit, but they want to take their life to the next level.
And optimize, right? Like we talk a lot about that at XPT. How do we optimize ourselves in our lives, whatever that is? And also what I appreciate about that group, and in ways I think more courageous than myself, you know, Laird is sort of a great figure of this, is they're just completely willing to try something new. And for me, it's like, that is the reminder. You know, we all like to do what we're good at. We stay in those lanes. And these people coming, besides trying to be their best in their own lives, what they're really saying also is like, I'm a little nervous and I'm still willing to try it. And that's really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely taking yourself out of your comfort zone, which I think is all part of it, right?
Well, that's where the learning and the expansion, but also, you know, when we're younger and we try new things or we get better a little bit at each day, that's the gold. So why, when we're, you know, 50, 60, 70, why do we either stop thinking that we can still keep improving or try something new that makes us uncomfortable? But then that feeling you get when you go, you know, 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago, I couldn't even do that. And now I can because I've learned. I think that is such a big part of life, and staying interested and staying youthful and vitality. And it has less to do with age. Like, oh, we act like that because we're 20 or 15. No, it's because we're like, yeah, let's check it out. I'm open. I'm curious. Let's see. And I think that those environments have a lot of people that are, you know, a multitude of ages being willing to do that.
Yeah. And I know you touched on breathing, and you're right. It's such an important thing. And I never realized how important the breath is until a couple of weeks ago. I broke my nose, and I'm struggling to breathe now because I don't breathe through my mouth. So it makes you really realize the importance of breath. So one thing I'd love to talk to you about is because so many people think, oh, this person's excels at sport, and so they must, you know, that old saying of you're good at one thing, you're good at everything. And I think there is some truth in that you bring that same sort of, I guess, mindset with you. But how about your role as a mum? Is it easy for you?
Well, is anyone's role as a mom easy? I don't think it is easy. I think it's natural. I'll say that. It feels very, and when I say that, what I mean is when the girls arrived, what was natural was to be their mom and to be there. Now navigating what that all looks like is a kick in the ass for sure, and is ever changing. So I will say it's natural. And it's been hard because it's so important, and I don't want to get it supposedly wrong, but I don't think that's what parenting is. I think parenting is a series of kind of getting it right and getting it wrong, and hopefully more right than wrong, but ultimately loving them, being there for them, trying to set up healthy boundaries, and also being a powerful, you know, a good example, not just being, you know, talking, but like literally being just the example, and trying to encourage them to figure out who they are, like not to look to you, not to look at the life that you have created that is an extension or is a representation of you, but how do we create space for them to break away from that, to really hear their own voice. But it's a dance, you know, and it's the best thing I've ever done. And it's not only hard. It's like, sometimes you're like, oh, that's magic. And then sometimes you're like, I don't know why I feel disappointed. Or then you move deeper into your parenting years, and then you think, oh my God, did I just get all of that wrong? You know, so I think you have all of these elements that, they're really made to kind of crack you open and I think make you sort of an adult. Like, it's like, well, what are you going to do? And you got to really think about this and you got to navigate this, and you can't go to your default and you can't go to your fears. Try not to manipulate them to do what you want. It's like all this stuff that I think is really makes you grown up.
Yeah. And do you have people that you can go to and ask advice of? And do you think the general public have that as well?
I didn't have I have a few, sort of people, older friends that are just a little further down the road. So the ones that I trust that way, I will definitely use as a resource. And I went, Laird and I, we sort of had a really challenging scenario with one of my daughters a couple of years ago, it just was, stuff that is unexpected. And, was dealing with some trauma and some other things. And so I did actively get like professional help. But I'll be honest with you, some of it didn't help at all, because you go to organized places for help and it's like they start putting labels. Oh, they're this, they're that, especially this day and age. Oh, they're that, they're this, they're that. Then you have a young person taking on these identities early where they could just be transitioning. They could have had something occur that's also throwing them off their axis. And now then they think they have all these other things. Like I have all these other, I'm OCD, I'm codependent, I'm whatever. Right. And so I found it a very tricky landscape to navigate for me personally, because I was like, well, wait a second, this is a young person who's had some stuff happen and who's going through a hard time. How do we help them arrive at the place where they can deal with what they're managing and move on, forward into the magic that is their life, and heal and not be labeled or identified. So I think people have to be careful with that, because you get outside help and sometimes it sets you in a path that it's like, well, no, for that year or two, like if it was me as a young person, I was having a hard time. That's actually not who I became. And I did go and have spoken with a woman named Byron Katie, who has a program called The Work. And that was really powerful for me and my ears. I could hear what she was saying about identity. I could hear there's a level of surrender that she's able to do that you think there's just no way. And then you start to realize that that's actually closer to the truth about we can't really control it all. Right. So how do we move through this with our child, with our partner, and in the most positive and loving and productive way? I mean, imagine I'm relatively sort of high performance going into parenting. I was like, oh, I'm going to be so in charge of this. And I really had some awakenings, many, and I have many and more, I'm sure, in front of me. And also like, hey, your kids are going to go through things that you don't foresee and you never would want for them. They might even become types of people that parts of it you may not even be like, wow, I don't connect with that, or I don't like, that's so different than me. But I think it's true. And when we can surrender, it not only gets easier. And so that was very helpful. And two things she said to me as a parent that I could do. The best thing for my kid was, and I have talked about this, is one, how can you figure out how to make yourself happy? And that's sort of a generic thing, right? Like, who the hell is walking around happy all the time? Nobody. But, sense of self and purpose, and like overall, like you wake up and you're like, your kids see you and you go, it looks like my mom's feeling like she knows how to make herself feel good, And then the other thing she said, which is in ways been the harder, because if you really break it down, what it means, it's hard to do, is to really listen. And so when your kids come to you and go, I'm feeling like this and I want that, and this is, we want to wrap it up and be like, oh, come on, or, oh, no, sweetie, it's going to be okay. Or look at all those great things you have in your life, or whatever stuff we want to do to fix it. And it's like, no, really listen and just be like, yeah, I can see where that's hard. Because then what you're doing is you're teaching them to understand their own feelings. They'll be open, express them. And that no feeling is bad. Right? Like, we just feel this way. Does it mean it's a real feeling? It's going to be a feeling forever? No. but it's getting them to work it out themselves. That was really helpful. But oh yes, I have gotten my butt kicked in parenting, believe me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. You say no feeling is bad, and it's not wrong, and it's not bad. And so often, I guess, as parents, we almost want to say, no, that's not the feeling that you should have. It's like when you're training someone and they're stretching and they're like, I feel it here. You can't say, no, you shouldn't feel it there. That's where they're feeling it. So, it's a very tricky path. And the reason why I asked you is if you had people to turn to is because I feel like stress is one of the biggest factors of people's health and fitness today, and why we're having all these chronic health issues. And I think it's got a lot to do with relationships and who you can depend on, and obviously not just your partner, but other people that you can sort of look up to and a mentor as such. And, Byron Katie, you had there to talk to, and I think that's great. And I'm sure you had other people that you could reach out to. But I heard some horrible statistics recently that 1 in 4 Americans actually have someone that they could reach out to in times of difficulty or anything, just like, I'm having an issue with this and I just need some help or just some advice. And to me, that's pretty sad that there's only 1 in 4 people that feel that they've got someone like that.
Well, that's community living has died. We live in urban environments. We're spread out. We're not with our families. That was the whole thing, right? Because when you're freaking out as let's say you have a new mom, and she's got a baby, and then it's all unknown, and it's so scary. They're so little, and to have just another woman who would be nearby. Usually it would be either an older sister, an aunt, a mother, to go, oh no, it's okay. That's normal. And oh, haha, my 3rd kid did that. Just to even have that makes you go, oh, it's okay. So I think it's something you have to actively pursue, but it also needs to be the right people, because it's like, okay, let's say, for example, you have a friend, a girl, and she falls in love. Okay. And let's make the scenario a little dramatic. Let's say she's 36 or 7 and she hasn't been in a relationship in a long time, and all of her girlfriends are single, or many of them. And she meets somebody, and it's real and it's significant, and it's a real thing. I always say to my girlfriends that have this happen, make sure whoever you're talking to or is helping you is happy that you're in the relationship. Because the other thing is to have people that are rooting for you and that you're rooting for them. And you have to be that person. Like, hey, your life could be in the dumps, but if one of your friends is kicking ass, you have to be like, you know what? I'm really happy for you. And so it's not only about having someone to talk to, it's about having someone who is for you and doesn't walk around with the filter of what's everything going on in their life. Like, you know what I mean? So I think it's both, and you have to be that person to attract that person. And it's so important. I mean, how do we get through any of this stuff? How do we navigate all these uncharted waters without having someone a little bit ahead of us, or someone who's gone through it, to go, you know what? I get it. I'm going to not only save you some stress, I'm going to save you some time, because I went through that and it took me X amount of time, and I can condense it and help you right away. So it's so important. And how do we find ways to connect,
And that's why I want to suggest to you that you, I'm going to sound like Joe Rogan now, because I'm sure when you went on his podcast, I can't remember if he told you this or not, but he tells all these guests that they should start a podcast. I think he did tell you that, actually. But this is my proposal to you. I think you should start a podcast, and I'll start it for you if you like. And it's called Ask Gabby. And it's about life, fitness, being a mum, being a wife, being an ex-model, whatever you want. It's just Ask Gabby.
Well, this is what I'll do. How about this? I'll compromise, because I am actually very uncomfortable. I've said this before, like, I don't have answers, but I do have questions. I used to do a podcast with Neil Strauss. We have very different styles. And then I said, okay, because I am interested in people and in learning. So I said, okay, I'll do my own podcast. I'm actually not comfortable fully doing it on my own, because you kind of go, well, you've got to trust yourself. right? And which is weird because you would think that'd be not a problem, but I'm just being forthcoming. So I have actually banked already 3. I'll start rolling them out after I have 5. But what I will do based on your suggestion is in every podcast, I will have a section that I will take on, let's say 3 to 5 questions in a real way and answer them as honestly as I can. Because I feel it's interesting. I just never feel like I have that much to share or that I know anything. And so when people are like, you should, I'm like, I don't want to tell anyone what to do. I know that like, yeah, okay, the truth is better than a lie, and getting to bed early is good, and being loving is better than not. But beyond that, you kind of go, yo, I'm fumbling through.
But you know what? It's not about you knowing the answer. It's about you also having a question, and it's about you caring.
I do care. I weirdly, like in this weird way of, because it's funny, I grew up kind of, I don't want to say unempathetic, but I'm a Capricorn. I sort of grew up a little bit on my own. I had to look after myself. But what I realized is that we're all in it together. Like, I know this to be true. And like, if I could participate and just pass the good stick on to the next person who passes it on to the next, and we're all sort of elevating, that just seems like the way to go.
Exactly. And so Ask Gabby it is. I like it. I'll help you host it.
You get full credit for that, Allie.
Awesome. Cool. So on that note then, have you got any final words of wisdom that you can perhaps share? I know you don't have any wisdom. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you do. But just in case you find something, have you got anything to say?
I think it's very easy to get swept up in thinking of how we're supposed to be or what we should want or, all of these things. But I think if people could just take a moment and start with themselves. And again, women and moms this is harder for them. I always say overall, of course, my family comes first. However, in my day-to-day practice, it's me first. If you're in a relationship, it's that relationship. Then it is the children. Then it is work. Because if I don't have this in order, it makes everything else so difficult. So if I'm not square with myself, it makes loving and being loved by Laird hard. If we don't have a unified front that's a level of harmony, it makes parenting and making the children feel like they're in a overall, safe and peaceful home. And then also I am more productive in my work. I'm more clear. I'm more confident and energized if these things in my personal life are in order. So whichever way we can do that, but I think it's important to check in with that. And having said that, I'm well aware that people are busy and work is demanding and all of these things. But if they could, even in tiny ways, like when I drive my car, I always say I'm in active meditation. I'm not talking about self-care like, well, I need 3 hours a day. I'm talking about, are the people in my life, my friendships, my relationship, is there anything that I need to manage? Is there something that's not clear or comfortable? Do I need to contend with that and keep that clean and button that up or confront that person? So when I talk about checking in with yourself, really checking in with yourself, not eating crow, or biting your tongue for too long and things like that. And then with your partner, loving them and saying like, hey, I'm going to show up and love them and make their life better. If they choose to do the same, great. I'm not in control of the choices they make. I can only control if it feels good or not to me. And then moving out from there. So that reminder, of like, hey, this spaceship we're on is moving quick and it's spinning and life is short. Like, what do you want to do? And who do you want to be with? And who do you want to be? And what do you want to put out there? Like, what do you want to contribute to make it, a little bit better because you're there?
That's cool. I like that last bit. What do you want to put out there just to make it a bit better? That's awesome. And Gabby, do you have a tattoo?
I do. So I have my father passed away when I was 5, and so when I turned 18, they gave me a necklace he was wearing in a plane crash that he passed away in, and I had when I was about 21, I had that symbol, which is a Japanese symbol. We've still yet to figure out the meaning. It'd be funny if it's like chocolate cake or something. But
is it a Chinese character?
It is.
You know, I speak Japanese. I could have told you. You should have shown me.
Okay, well, I'll send you a
photo. Yeah.
And there was the consensus is maybe it was his birth month, like it represented October. So I had that put on. And then many years ago, I put underneath my wedding band loyalty, because the joke was I was going to put Laird's name, or whatever. And the guy's like, that's the kiss of death to put other than your children's name on your body. So, and Laird and I had kind of gone prior to that through a bumpy time. And so it was sort of just a representation of something. And so underneath in Japanese symbols, I have loyalty underneath my wedding band. It's very small, but that's it.
That's cool. That's cool. I like that. I like how I like how the tattoo artist said not to put his name. He's probably had to remove so many because of that, right? Well,
that's what he said. He goes, listen, I'm going to put flowers over it. I'm going to do something. He's like, don't put his name. I go, oh.
He didn't want to jinx you. That's great. Look, Gabby, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate your insights, and I know you don't think you have wisdom, but I sort of sense there is some there.
Well, I really appreciate, what a badass you are. And I hope your nose recovers quickly. But, it's funny, like as an athlete, right? I see athletes like you who are very different than me. And I'm always like in awe, I'm like, oh, that's such a different language than I speak. So I just want you to know that.
That's crazy because I'm not an athlete. And it's funny too. Well, everyone thinks whatever they are, but like I see an athlete as someone that sort of competes and performs, and I don't do any of that. But one of the funniest things, I came to XPT and I was like all excited, and, part of my ego wanted to, like, I'm not a swimmer, and I thought, oh, I'll be okay in the pool. I want to, make sure I do a good job and whatever else. But not only could I I missed out on half of the activities. I couldn't even do the beach exercises because I had a chest infection. And my husband had a laugh because he's like, Gabby and Laird are going to think you're so unfit and such, like, here you are meant to be like the athlete or whatever, and you're not even able to attend that session. And I'm like, yep, that's just the way it is.
Oh, no. I think, listen, I've been around a long time, and I can look at people and know if they're athletes or not. And then, of course, you get surprises where you have people that maybe their physique is not quite, and I'm not talking about even being super fit, and they're like freaky good athletes. So I'm not saying that. You're one of the most obvious athletes I've ever seen. So I just thought you were having a rough go.
I was. Excellent, Gabby. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
All right. Have a great one. Aloha.
For all the resources and show notes from today's episode, please go to www.ally.fitness. If you liked today's episode, please show your appreciation by going to iTunes, give us a 5-star review, and subscribe.